everyone, audience, students and scholars. Here I'm Dr. Amjad Ali. In this video, we will learn what brings the supply and demand for goods and services into equilibrium. We are starting our discussion with the circular diagram. We began by examining the supply of goods and services, and we have just discussed the demand for them. How can we be certain that all these flow balance? In other words, what ensure that some of the consumption, investment and government purchases equals the amount of output produced? We will see that in our classical model that interest rate is the price that has the crucial role for equilibrating the supply and demand. There are two ways to think about the role of interest in the economy. We can consider how the interest rate affect the supply and demands of goods and services, or we can consider how the interest rate affects the supply and demand for loanable funds. Okay, equilibrium in the market for the goods and services, the supply and demand for the economy's output. We have a three-sector economy in our circular diagram. So from three-sector economy, the model become as y is equal to c plus I plus g, and here c is equal to c into y minus t, I is equal to IR, and G is equal to G prime or G bar, and T is equal to T prime or T bar. The demand for the economy's output comes from the consumption, investment and government purchases. Consumption depends on disposable income, investment depends on real interest rate, and government purchases and taxes are exogenous variable set by the fiscal policy maker. So that's why we consider consumption and investment as a constant here. Okay, the factor of production and the production function determine the quantity of output supplied to the economy. So we have y is equal to function of k prime or L prime. So this means that labor and capital are fixed. So when we have a labor and capital are fixed, then we have a y prime, or this means that we have a output as a fix. So now combine and these equations describing the supply and demand for output. If we substitute the consumption function and the investment function into the national income account identity, we obtain y is equal to c into y minus t plus IR plus g. Okay, we suppose that G and T are fixed by the policy and the level of output is fixed by the factor of production and production function. So it can be written as y prime is equal to C into y prime minus T prime plus IR plus G prime. This equation states that the supply of output equals demand, which is the sum of consumption, investment and government purchases. Notice that interest rate is the only variable not already determined in the last equation. This is because the interest rate still has a key role to play. It must adjust to ensure that the demand for goods equal the supply. The greater the interest rate, the lower level of investment, and thus the lower the demand for goods and services. If the interest rate is too high, then investment is too low and the demand for output falls short of the supply. If the interest rate is too low, then investment is too high and the demand exceeds the supply. At equilibrium, interest rate and the demand for goods and services equal the supply. This conclusion may seem somewhat mysterious. How does the interest rate get to the level that balance the supply and demand for goods and services? The best way to answer this question is to consider how financial market fit into this story. Okay, equilibrium in the financial market, the supply and demand for the loanable fund. Okay, the interest rate is the cost of borrowing and the return to the lending in the financial market. We can better understand the role of interest in the economy by thinking about the financial market. To do this, rewrite the national income account identity as y minus c minus I is equal to y minus c minus g is equal to I. Okay, here the term y minus c minus g is the output that remains after the demand of consumer and the government have been satisfied. It is called the national saving or simply saving. In this form, the national income account identity shows that saving equal investment. Okay, to understand this identity more fully, we can split national saving into two parts. One part representing the saving of private sector and the other representing the saving of the government sector. So we get S is equal to y minus t minus c plus t minus g is equal to I. So here the term y minus t minus c is disposable income minus consumption, which is private saving. The term t minus g is the government revenue minus government spending, which is public saving. If the government spending exceeds the government revenue, then the government runs a budget deficit and public saving is negative. National saving is the sum of the private and public saving, as we have highlighted in circle diagram that reveals an interpretation of this equation. This equation states that the flow into the financial market, private and public saving, must balance the flow out of the financial market investment. Okay, while talking about the equilibrium in financial markets, the supply and demand for loanable funds, to see how interest rate brings financial markets into equilibrium, substitute the consumption function and the investment function into national income accounts identity. We get y minus c into y minus t minus g is equal to IR. Okay, note that G and T are fixed by policy and Y is fixed by the factor of production and the production function. So we get Y prime minus C into Y prime minus T prime minus G prime is equal to IR. So S prime is equal to IR. Okay, the left side of the equation shows that national saving depends on income, Y, and the fiscal policy variable G and T. For a fixed value of Y, G, and T national saving, S is also fixed. The right hand side of the equation shows that investment depends on interest rate. So for the further explanation, let's see the graphical presentation how the supply and demand for loanable funds will be in equilibrium in financial market. So here we have saving, investment, and interest rate. Here we have independent interest rate, and we have investment and saving as a dependent variable. Okay, the graph of saving and investment as a function of interest rate. The saving function is a vertical line. Here you can see that saving function is a vertical line because in this model saving does not depend on interest rate. The investment function slope downward as the interest rate decreases, more investment projects become profitable. For a quick review, one might think that it was a supply and demand diagram for a particular good. In fact, saving and investment can be interpreted in terms of supply and demand. In case the good as a loanable fund and it is a price is the interest rate. Saving is the supply of loanable fund. The household lend their saving to investors or deposit their saving in banks and then loans to the funds out for the investment. Investment is the demand for the loanable fund. Investor borrow from the public directly by selling bonds or indirectly by borrowing from banks. Because investment depends on interest rate, the quantity of loanable funds demanded also depends on interest rate. The interest rate adjusts until the amount that the firm want to invest equal the amount that the household want to save. If the interest rate is too low, investors want more of the economy's output than household want to save. Equivalently, quantity of loanable fund demanded exceed the quantity of supply. When this happens, the interest rate rises. Conversely, if interest rate is too high, households want to save more than firms want to invest. Because quantity of loanable funds supplied is greater than the quantity demanded, the interest rate falls. The equilibrium interest rate is found where the two curve across. We can see here we have an equilibrium point. At the equilibrium interest rate, household desire to save balance firm and the firm desire to invest, and the quantity of loanable funds supplied equal the quantity demanded. Okay, change in saving, the effect of fiscal policy. Okay, when you see the model that shows that fiscal policy affect the economy, and when the government changes its spending or the level of taxes, it affects the demand for the economy's output of goods and services and alters the national saving, investment, and equilibrium interest rate. Okay, here are the two ways how the fiscal policy affects on the equilibrium and increase in government purchases and a decrease in taxes. The other way is decrease in taxes. Okay, let's start the increase in government purchases. Consider first the effects of an increase in government purchases by an amount of delta y. Okay, the immediate impact is to increase the demand for goods and services by delta G, but because total output is fixed by the factor of production, the increase in government purchases must be met by a decrease in some other category of demand. Okay, like disposable income Y minus T is unchangeable, so consumption C is unchangeable as well. Therefore, the increase in government purchases must be met by an equal decrease in investment. Okay, to induce investment to fall, the interest rate must rise. Hence, the increase in government purchases causes the interest rate to increase and investment to decrease. Government purchases are said to crowd out investment. Okay, to grasp the effects of an increase in government purchases, consider the impact on markets for loanable fund, because increase in government purchases is not accompanied by an increase in taxes. The government finances the additional spending by borrowing, that is by reducing public saving, with private saving unchanged. This government borrowing reduces national saving. Okay, for the detailed explanation, let's see a graphical presentation that how government purchases are the government saving affects the investment of an economy. Okay, a reduction in saving. A reduction in national saving is represented by a leftward. We can see that a reduction in saving, leftward shift in the supply of loanable funds available for the investment. At the initial interest rate, the demand for loanable fund exceed the supply. The equilibrium interest rate rise to the point where the investment schedule crosses the new saving schedule. Thus, An increase in government purchases causes interest rate to rise from R1 to R2. Okay, a decrease in taxes. Now consider a reduction in taxes delta T. The immediate impact of the taxes cut is to raise disposable income and thus to raise consumption. Disposable income rises by delta T and consumption rises by an amount equal to delta T times the marginal propensity to consume MPC. The higher the MPC, the greater the impact of the taxes cut on the consumption. Okay, because the economy's output is fixed by the factor of production and the level of government purchases is fixed by the government, the increase in consumption must be met by a decrease in investment. Okay, for investment to fall, the interest rate must rise. Hence, a reduction in taxes like an increase in government purchases crowds out investment and raises the interest rate. When we can also here analyze that the effect of a tax cut by looking at saving and investment, because tax cut raises disposable income by delta T, consumption goes up by a marginal propensity to consume multiplied by delta T. National saving which equals Y minus C minus G falls by the same amount as consumption rises. Okay, we can see that how the decrease in taxes impact on saving or investment with the help of a diagram. Okay, changes in investment demand. Okay, till now we have discussed how fiscal policy change national saving. We can also use our model to examine other side of the market, the demand for investment. In this section, we look at the causes that effect of change in investment demand. Okay, one reason investment demand might increase in technological innovations. Suppose that someone invents a new technology such as the railroad or computer before a firm or a household can take advantage of the innovation. It must buy investment good. The invention of the railroad had no value until railroad cars were produced and tracks were laid. The idea of the computer was not productive until computers were manufactured. Okay, thus technological innovation leads to an increase in investment demand. Okay, investment demand may also change because the government encourages or discourages investment through the tax laws. Suppose that government increases personal taxes and use the extra revenue to provide tax cut for those who invest in new capital, such as changes in tax law make more investment project profitable, and like a technological innovation increases the demand for investment goods. So here we have a graphical presentation that how investment changes can impact the demand for capital or interest rate. So an increase in the demand for investment, the graph shows that the effect of an increase in investment demand at any given interest rate, the demand for investment goods is higher. The increase in demand is represented by a shift in the investment schedule to rightward. So you see here I1 to I2. Okay, the economy moved from the old equilibrium A point to B point. The surprising implication of this figure is that the equilibrium amount of investment is unchanged under our assumption that fixed level of saving determine the amount of investment. In other words, there is a fixed supply of loanable fund. An increase in investment demand merely raises the equilibrium interest rate. We could reach a different conclusion. However, if we modify our simple consumption function and allow consumption to depend on interest rate, because interest rate is the return to saving, a higher interest rate might reduce consumption and increase saving. If so, the saving schedule would be upward sloping rather than a vertical. So for further understanding, we develop an increase in investment demand when saving depends on interest rate. With an upward sloping saving schedule, an increase in investment demand would raise both the equilibrium interest rate and equilibrium quantity of investment. So this diagram shows that how investment is changes by the change in interest rate. The increase in interest rate causes household to consume less and save more. The decrease in consumption, we can say that free resources for the investment. When saving is positively related to interest rate, the rightward shift in the investment schedule increases the interest rate and the amount of investment. The higher interest rate induce people to increase saving, which in turn allow investment to increase. So this is all about what bring the supply and demand for goods and services into equilibrium. So see you with another video. Ciao.